Proudly supported by Superior Engineering and Diesel Conversions Australia.
Now we have modified it so much on this patrol lately that I have no idea if it is going to start. So in today's episode, we are going to try and start it. It is a very daunting thing because I've changed so much on this patrol. Now we do have a few things before I can actually even try and start it. We need to do like turbo drains and some wiring and stuff like that. So I'm gonna tidy that stuff up now. Then we can try and turn the key, see if this thing will light up. I don't think it's gonna drive, but it probably will start. I say probably because I don't actually know. We've got to start by finishing everything off. I've got a list over on the whiteboard. We'll finish that stuff off. We'll get the keys out, get them in the ignition, get it going. Now, if you did miss the last episode, we have got the CompuShift controlling our transmission because the 4J won't control it by itself. But there is a little bit of wiring that I do need to button up on this thing. Now the first thing is we have to find the reverse relay. Now I've done a little bit of research. I don't think this patrol has a reverse relay, so I'm actually gonna add one in. So if you see this Scotch lock here, this is actually my reverse camera. It's going to a yellow wire that is going into the loom. Now that yellow wire controls the reverse lights that are on the back of the car here. So when the CompuShift sees that the transmission is in reverse, it needs to turn on the rear light. Now because I don't want the CompuShift taking all the load of the lights in the reverse camera, I am going to be adding in just a simple relay. So I need to wire that one in. I'll mount it up probably under that kick panel there, and we'll run the wires to the battery. Now Diesel is back on the scene today, guys, and don't expect him to do too much work today because it's a little bit hot, but he'll at least be laying on the ground just being in the way and doing Diesel things that he normally does. Right, I've gone ahead and put a old spotlight relay that I had just under there, down where the old TCM wiring was. Now we're all hooked up to the reverse light here, and we're all hooked up to the CompuShift right here. One thing that's always annoyed me with four-wheel drives is when you pass a wire through the firewall, you have to get it over to the battery. Now, it makes the engine bay look really messy and tacky when you're constantly running wires over to that positive battery. So in order to fix that, I've actually been to J-Car and bought this M8 double stud here. So this is going to be really good because we can now bring the power over across to this side, and we can have a permanent spot to pick up 12-volt power. This is basically only moving the positive terminal over to this side of the car, just so we don't have to run those wires and make it look stupid. So I'm gonna get that mounted up on the firewall. I'm gonna finish up the wiring. Now the good thing is I've also got my Harrop front locker wire sitting there because it was actually hooked up to the back of my Red Arc when the dual battery was in here. But now that we don't have that, I would normally have to extend that all the way over to that side. It's going to be really good because I can just hook this up. I can hook up our reverse relay wire as well. And like if we want to put a UHF in or anything like that, I can pass it through this passenger side and just hook it straight up to that stud. I'm going to try and get it tucked away quite nicely over on the side here. Now just trim up all the wires. Right, just connecting these two wires now, which is the locker and the reverse relay for the CompuShift. I don't know about you guys, but I think that is a bloody beautiful idea, and I'm really happy with that. Now, eventually I will get a little like cover to protect those studs so nothing hits them. The other thing I am going to do is put a MIDI fuse over here somewhere. Maybe not today, but eventually I'll just MIDI fuse this main power wire here just in case we have a bit of a meltdown. But honestly, that is great. It just tidies up the engine bay just that little bit more. Now, I do need to run a starter motor wire still, so I might quickly make that, then we can finish up the TCM wiring. Now, in order to make this lead up for the starter motor, I need a perfect length, which means that I'm gonna have to bolt the starter motor up. So I'm gonna do that now. Right, so it's been about an hour, made some pretty good progress. Got the starter motor in, ran the new wire over to the battery positive so we can actually start this thing. Now I know that looks like a black hole, but there is a starter motor down there, and then I've ran a brand new wire right up and over to our battery. So that is this wire here. So once that's connected and we turn the key, it should allow that starter motor to start spinning. That's another job that has been ticked off the whiteboard there, so we are making good progress. While we're on the starter motor side of things, there is a few more wires that I need to hook up. Automatic cars and full drives have a park neutral switch, which basically locks you out from starting the car unless you're in park and neutral. If you were to bridge that out, which some people do, you'd be able to start it in gear, and let's say if someone jumped in your car and it was in first gear or something and they started it, it would just literally drive up the road. Now I've done a little bit of research, and this 2-pin connector here looks to be our park neutral. I'm going to strip these wires back in order to put them onto our park neutral switch. Right, so the plug is done. I now just got to cut this to length, run it down the side of the chassis and plug it into the inhibitor switch. Down the side of the car, we also have the transfer case wires here. So I haven't ran that yet. So what I'm going to do is merge all these together. We'll just run the one conduit line down there. I've decided to use this factory plug here because it'll just plug straight on top of those wires. They cut the wires a little bit short, but we're going to make it work. Right, that will now plug straight in, but what I want to do is try and merge all these harnesses together and just create one loom going down to the transmission. Right, that's the two looms joined together nice and neat. So it's time to run this down the side of the motor here. Now, obviously we've got an exhaust on this side at the moment, so I'm trying to keep it away from that as much as possible. It's bloody good though, because we're getting another thing off the list. Now, what I want to do is a little test just to make sure we're moving in the right direction. So I've got the multimeter set up here. Now, the positive of the multimeter is hooked up to the signal that activates the starter motor, and the negative is just on the negative terminal there. So hopefully when we turn the key in the ignition now, we should see 12 volt on that screen, meaning that it's actually going to crank the motor over. It won't actually crank it over at the moment because I've got the wire disconnected, but if we see 12 volt, it means that it will crank if I hook that wire up. So let's see what happens. Right, I'm going to turn the key to ignition, and now I'm going to turn it to start. Yeah, boy, 12 volt. That means that she would be cranking right now if I hooked that wire back up. How bloody good. Not much gets me excited anymore, but boys, that is bloody exciting. 12 volt on the starter, meaning that she's gonna crank. Right, it's actually the next day, and for you guys who want me to film absolutely everything, I'm really sorry, because I'm just trying to power through this so we can turn the key, get this thing running. But I've been in here this morning already for a couple of hours. I've hooked up the cooler lines. I've also done a little bit more wiring in the cab. I've also loaded the RE4 program into the CompuShift, so it actually knows that it's an RE4. There's literally only like a handful of things left to do before we can actually try and turn this thing over. I'm getting really, really nervous. I'm worried about the transmission. I'm worried about that torque converter. I don't know why, it's just me being paranoid, but it's also very exciting. Just super nervous, but exciting. Now I have buttoned up a lot. The only real things left to do is the battery. I've got some new terminals from All Good Off-Road to put on so we can neaten up the wiring beside the battery. I've also got to service it, so we've got to drop the current oil that's in there. There shouldn't be too much in there, but fill up the transmission with transmission fluid as well, and then just double check everything, triple check everything, and then hopefully we can start. Right, I want to quickly show you guys the TPS, which is this throttle position here. As I push down on the accelerator, it goes right up all the way to 100. Now I did have to program that in and do like a little setup on it, but that was really easy to do. So our throttle pedal is now working. You can see that moving up and down. We've also got our temperature readout and our gear. If you can see up there, we're in park. Now I switched over to reverse, and as I come down, it goes into all the gears there. So that is all working back into park. And we also have our torque converter lockup. We have our speed up the top. Once I program in the tire size, that'll actually read our speed. This thing's really cool because it's like having an extra 5 gauges in your car. So we'll mount that up somewhere really nice once I get all the interior back together. Right, now I want to do the battery next. So I'm going to disconnect these terminals and rip this out because we actually have to put the battery box back in so this doesn't move around. God, that is bloody heavy. Forgot how heavy this thing was. Ugh. Right, just quickly painted these up because they look like crap. Just gonna go back in. Also just painted these up. Just make it look a little bit more presentable. Right, these are the uni lugs that got sent over from All Good Off-Road. These things are going to tidy up this engine bay a lot. You can see we've got 2 studs for heaps of like ring terminals. So we'll get that fitted up. We'll tidy up this battery a little bit more. Some of these wires here will eventually have a MIDI fuse, and I'll mount the MIDI fuses here so they'll be kind of coming over like that, and then we'll have lines going to the battery. But for now, we can just hook these straight up. Right, this definitely won't be staying like this because it's super messy, but it'll do just for now. Right, you can see those terminals have cleaned that up a lot. I would still love to tidy all this up. And like I said, I'm doing MIDI fuses on these two wires, so they'll be nice and tucked away and a lot neater than that. But the battery box itself actually looks pretty good in there, where before we just had a battery. So I'm very happy with that. It's starting to look like a bloody car. Now the next job I have is the oil drain. So the turbo has oil going into the top of it. It's got to drain out and go into the sump. I've got this 150-degree stuff because it's quite close to the manifold. It's just like a blue hose, but I also did buy this fire sleeve from Pertec. So that will go in there. We'll create a little drain hose and it'll be well protected from any heat. All right, I've got it on down the bottom, which is a bit of a mission, but getting there. Right, so I've gone ahead and fitted the dipstick for the transmission. Now you've got to actually fill the transmission through that little hole there. So that's why I chucked that in. I've also gone ahead and put the new oil filter onto the 4J. Now this is the filter I took off. I actually bought a much shorter can. It's about yay long, and that's gonna help with the exhaust because we are very slowly running out of room. The exhaust somehow has to get down there. There's not much room at all for it. It is a bit nerve-wracking. I'm really hoping that we can make the exhaust work on this thing. It would be bloody awesome. Now I am also draining the oil currently out of the motor there. So once that's drained, we can top it up with the new stuff. The transmission, I'll just have to fill up. And when we start it, it's actually going to pump oil into the cooler. We're gonna lose a lot of it straight away. So I'm gonna fill it up. We'll run it for a bit, turn it off, and fill it back up. That's if it actually runs. We got to get to that part first. Now I also do kind of want to just like turn it over and try to make it not start and see if we get oil up to the turbo, and then that'll tell me that I've got oil pressure. I don't actually have an oil pressure gauge in this thing yet. We'll be getting one eventually, but just don't have one at the moment. So if I disconnect one of the sensors, that will make it run. We should be able to crank it over and get oil out of that top line there, and then we can basically fire it up and try and fill the transmission through this little hole using this bottle here. It's going in. I'm making a mess, but it's going in. Right, that's 4 litres. Must have been a bit of oil already in the box because that is saying that there's oil there. Before I forget, better do the new power steering. Gonna use this filling container here. This thing was only like 40 bucks or something from Repco. Real handy when you're dealing with like a 20 litre drum like this. Tip it into here, then tip it in the motor. No mess. How exciting. Oil going in for the first time. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it is just a little bit over, which is what you want when you got an empty oil filter. Very, very nervous at the moment, but we are at the stage where I'm ready to crank it. Got 3 fluids in that we need, which was power steering, engine oil, and transmission oil. So what I'll do is this turbo line here, I'll actually take that off, put it in a bucket, make sure we've got oil pressure up to the turbo. Now I am actually going to have to plug in the MAF sensor and the MAP sensor. So I've got to figure out a way to do that. But that's to run it. At the moment, we just want to try and crank it, just see what happens. I'm also going to pull this fuel pump fuse out just so it's not trying to pump fuel while we're cranking, but we are ready. Let's see if she cranks. It wasn't cranking very fast then, so I'll try and put the jump pack on it. Hopefully that was the battery and it's not something sinister like the transmission being locked up. Right, I just went down to the battery place, had that battery tested. Turns out it's good, 700cc, it's pulling, which is more than enough to turn a 4-banger over. Now I went ahead and I've added this extra positive cable, just in case the one that we made up earlier isn't big enough. So that goes down to the starter. I still also have the other starter wire there, so there is 2. I've also added quite a thick earth over to here. And then at the moment, I've got this battery that's out of the Triton with some jumper leads up to give this a bit of a kickstart because it's probably starting to get flat anyway. One thing I have noticed is the starter motor is getting really, really hot. Kind of indicates that it might be a faulty starter, but at the moment it's turning enough to probably start it. Like it's doing about 3 to 4 full turns and it starts dying down a bit. So I'll see how it goes with this extra lead and the battery on. And if it starts like winding probably 10 times, we might even just try and fire it up because that's probably all it's gonna need. It's definitely not any better with that on. I don't really know what else to do. We haven't got oil up at the turbo yet. We could just plug everything in, try and start it to see if it kicks. I don't know. I don't really know what to do. Right, that wasn't any better, but I think it's turning over enough for it to start. I'm really suspicious of that starter motor being the issue. Like it's getting quite hot and none of my leads or anything are getting hot, which signifies that the leads aren't too skinny or anything like that. And it signifies that there might be a problem in that starter there. My mind's telling me no, but my body just keeps doing work. So I've gone ahead, I fitted up this tube here, which has the map sensor on the top there. So that is one sensor that we needed. We've also need a map sensor, which I've just got dangling in the wind there, which should be enough for it to run. Everything's plugged in except for the ECU. So as soon as I pop that guy in and crank it, it should start. Oh, I got to put the fuse into the fuel pump as well. Bloody nervous, but you guys didn't come here to see me have starting issues. You came for it to start up. This is the last attempt at trying to start it today. Got the jump pack back on. I've had it on charge for about half a which is probably not enough, but at least it's something. I've gone under the car, given the starter motor a good smack with a hammer just to try and free up any dirt or anything on the brushes. Try crank it one more time. Hopefully it starts, but if it doesn't, I'll probably have to replace the starter motor. If that doesn't fix it, just keep going down the line, I guess. It started! Oh! Ran a few times now. It's starting every kick, which is good. I'm going to go ahead and check transmission fluid and engine oil. Then we'll try kick it over a few more times. It might not be staying on idle because of the MAF sensor not being like in a flappy boy situation, but yeah, at least it runs. Stoked about that. Hopefully the transmission works as well. We won't know that until we can get it to idle. Right guys, the build's all finished. Just done the intercooler pipes up now. You can see she's all finished up, guys. Thanks for watching. Gone ahead and added a length of aluminium intercooler piping and just put the MAF sensor at the end of it. I'm gonna see if it idles a lot better with the MAF sensor in. Thank you for watching. All right, guys, I am bloody blown away. I've just been sitting here looking at this thing for the past half an hour and I just can't believe that it's finally running. We've only got a few little things left to do and then we can drop it off to King Fab Customs for them to do their wizardry and TIG up all the pipe work, and there's a few other little bits and pieces that are a surprise that are coming from those guys. So I'm very excited for that as well. God, it has been quite a long road to get to this point. I mean, if you were just doing the engine like a stock engine just by itself with the DCA kit, you'd pretty much just bang it out in like, I don't know, a couple of weekends maybe. But for how much we have done with the transmission, the motor, obviously the transmission, that was completely unrelated to an engine conversion, but super glad that that's all done and beefed up. As strong as it is, it's going to be a bloody weapon now. Just honestly super happy, very pleased that everything is running and everything is working. It just makes me really, really proud. Now what is next is we'll probably have one more half episode of just tidying this stuff up. Then we'll probably load it onto a trailer. I'll have to borrow the work rig, load it up on a trailer. We'll take it to King Fab Custom, drop it off there. Have no idea how long that is going to take for those guys to do what they need to do, but they can have it as long as they want. Got a few other little bits and pieces I want to film while the car's gone. So yeah guys, super stoked that it runs. If you guys have watched to the end of this video, please comment what you think about my intake tube. Should we keep it or should we get King Fab Customs to tidy it up just a little bit? So thanks everyone for sticking around and sorry for the roller coaster of a video. See you guys in the next ep. Goodbye.